Okay, so just like in my first video, I'm going to show you guys how to set up for your Moxa practice. So we're just going to use a normal tissue. This one's Kleenex brand, if you can see right there. So I'm going to put it on, this is just an aluminum tin so it will be magnetic and also so it absorbs the heat. So I'm going to put my tissue right on top, and then I'm going to use I just have some magnets that I cut into, it was a strip of a magnet, and I just cut it into 4 pieces. So I'm going to place that on the 4 corners. Again, I go through this in my other Moxa video as well, so I'm not going to take as much time as to why I'm doing certain things. So I'm going to place that in the 4 corners, and then I'm going to start with my Moxa practice. So we're not going to go through how and why this is so efficient. Please watch the other Moxa video to understand that. We're just going to go into how you can begin your own Moxa practice. So I'm going to try to, as much as I can, keep what I'm doing in the frame. So I have my little incense stick. I have a lighter here. I have my Moxa. So I'm just going to take out a little bit of the Moxa, keep that ashtray on my right-hand side because I'm right-handed. All right, and then I'm going to start burning, and this is for my Moxa practice. And so again, so this is always for more so half grain than it is for full grain. So keep that in mind. You can definitely practice your half grain, your full grain on this if you'd like, but it's not necessary. Well, it doesn't give you as accurate of a heat and temperature gauge as it would with the half grain. So this is just the normal, hey, maybe I'm watching TV or I'm listening to a podcast and I'm just practicing. So if you notice, I'm not really rolling with my left hand here. This is a little bit more advanced way of doing it. In the beginning, I definitely recommend you rolling with your thumb and first finger to create a better cone. I have just found through my own personal practice that I make softer cones if I do it a slightly different way. And we're not going to cover that here because that's a little bit more advanced. So again, this is just a basic Moxa practice. Now we're going to start testing ourselves for the basic Moxa practice. And how you're going to do that is you're going to set a timer. Now usually I use my phone as a timer. I can't right now because I'm filming this, but you're going to set it for a minute, and I would start a new row. And once you push on the timer, set it for a minute, make sure your incense isn't lit. So you're going to put your incense down. Let's pretend it's not lit. Actually, we can start from the beginning. So again, my incense isn't lit. I'm going to put it down. Nothing's going to be in my hands, right? And then I'm going to set my timer. Beep. All right, and my timer is set for a minute. Once you get the timer started, that's when you're allowed to start touching things. So that's when I'm going to start taking my Moxa. That's when I'm going to start lighting. If you notice, I have a Moxa cone there. I'm not going to light it. Again, we're going to twist, place, and then burn. And this is this very specific style. You can, oh, that one's a little big. You can definitely, there's other ways of doing this. Some people place 4 cones and then burn 4 cones. I don't really recommend that in the beginning. And the reason being is it's very hard to watch the heat and the burn of 4 cones at the same time. And so you have a higher likelihood of burning your client. And the number 1 rule of Moxa is don't burn the client. That's the number 1 rule. Now, in a minute, you're going to want to get 10 cones at least. And these are going to be 10 cones that are tested by looking at the bottom of your tissue. We're probably at about a minute here. Again, if you're going to pull apart the tissue as shown in the previous video, you're going to check and make sure there's no holes on the bottom and that you have a steady burn. You also want to double check. You don't want them to be too light, don't want them to be too dark, so be very severe with yourself. And then you're going to try to get 10 cones in a minute. If you're not burning the Moxa cone and just practicing unrolling and placing, you want to do 20 cones per minute at least. And this is those numbers are my graduation test from acupuncture school. So that is one. Let's move this up. And so now we're going to focus on a slightly different method of training. And this is really to get your fingers to be a little bit faster. So we're going to practice building or tonifying moxa. Now this is a very basic moxa method where we place one cone and we place the other cone on top. We want to make sure that the bottom cone, see how that one went out? That one wasn't very good. We want to try to place one cone on top of the other, and ideally, you're going to place the next cone before the bottom cone comes out, burns out, excuse me. And this is a tonifying process. Now, the one thing you want to be really careful with is you want to make sure that any moxa, do you see how I let that one run? And it ran into that cone that wasn't burned out completely. And so what it's going to do is it's going to burn down and then it's going to burn to the side. That's a very, very hot moxa. So that's what you want to be very careful with. After practicing on your tissue, make sure you always practice on yourself before you practice on someone else. Be kind and first experience what you're doing before and change it before treating someone else. Okay, so that's tonifying moxa, very basic. Dispersing moxa, very basic, is that literally you're just going to make a slightly larger cone. Maybe it's a little bit more dense. You can still have a half grain. Do you see how that burned a little bit longer? That's going to be a little hotter moxa. It's going to feel a little bit like a pinch, almost like a needle would. Like you touched a hot pan and pulled your hand away before it gets burned is how I explained it to my parents. That's dispersing. In general, anything that feels hot to the patient is dispersing. Anything that feels warm is tonifying. That's very generalized. What's the word? It's just very generalized. So you're going to practice tonifying, placing them one on top, and then just burning them out completely with a little bit longer, a little bit more dense. You can also practice place, burn, and then I was a little slow here. Place, burn, and you're going to place and burn, and your goal is to place and burn before that cone burns out. I don't do this method quite often, so to be honest, I'm not very good at it, but let's see if I can get it. So if I do a little cone like this, there is absolutely no way in this world that I'm going to be able to make it to this cone and back to this cone in time. So usually for this method, you might do like a full grain. And then you're going to go to the other side, place, burn. Oh, almost, there we go. And because I was hurrying, do you see how that one didn't burn out completely? So you want to just be careful then when you place your next cone. And so then you just practice place, burn, and going back and forth between the two. Be careful with this as it can be very hot. Now you might all notice that I am not, make sure that's still in the frame. I'm not doing two things that you probably all learned. And that is, I'm not stopping the burn. And also, let's just use this guy because I already placed it. I'm not stamping him out. Those are also two more advanced versions of moxibustion. I'm not going to cover them here because honestly, I want you to perfect what I just covered first. So again, you're going to do 1 minute, 10 cones is the goal. And then tonifying moxa, building on top without the bottom layer, placing before the bottom layer goes out, but be careful about not burning someone. And then also letting it burn to the completely a little bit denser, maybe a little bit larger than a half, but not a full grain. And then place, burn, going back and forth between these two. Again, this method I don't use a ton, but these are some very common and basic methods.